But when I heard that this event was sponsored by Delta Sigma Theta and the Urban League of Chicago,
good answer.
I thought about the historic service of those two organizations. They are undeniable. That's why I'm here tonight. So, we have quite a few candidates here tonight. Not as many as I would have liked to have seen, but we have enough here to hear, so that you can hear those who have come out tonight to try to understand what they're about as you make your decision for November 2nd. We're going to go straight to the top line. I mean, I don't think this is the first position on the ballot, but I think it is the second position, the governor's position. We have only one gubernatorial candidate with us here tonight.
All right.
I don't know the nature of the absence of the others, so I'm not going to go into that because that wasn't explained to me. But we do have one here tonight. He is the incumbent governor of the state of Illinois, Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn likes to say that if there are 30 days until the election, he has 60 days because he works twice as hard, he says, as everybody else. In fact, I've watched the man over the past 21 months that he's inherited the governor's office, but at any rate, he is a tireless worker. I will say that, and that's not meant as an endorsement, but he does tire me out just covering him. At any rate, we're going to have 1 minute for each candidate to make an opening statement, and then I'm going to ask questions that have been provided to me by Delta Sigma Theta and the Urban League. And those are the questions I will ask. And then, because we only have one candidate here, there will be time remaining for those of you in the audience who would like to ask the governor a question about his run for re-election or election. Please feel free to do so. But for the moment, we're going to hear the opening statement of Governor Pat Quinn.
Right.
Thank everyone for coming tonight, the Urban League and Delta Sigma Theta. What a great sorority you have, a committed sorority. The Urban League is a special organization. I think the great leadership of the Urban League on jobs is what this election is all about. We need to make sure we have well-educated citizens in Illinois. That's what Delta Sigma Theta is all about. I think the combination of making sure that we have good jobs and good education is the best way to help Illinois. And since I was sworn in on the 29th of January last year, I have worked on those two issues night and day. As Charles said, there's, 27 days to the election? 54 if you don't sleep. So I'm not planning to sleep. I think it's important that we win this election for the right reasons. And the most important thing we can do to help the future is have good education from early childhood to kindergarten, to grammar school and high school. I was at Kennedy King City College today, and I believe in community colleges and investing in them. We've got to make sure we have scholarships for our students to go to college, four-year university. I protected that program as governor. I will always maintain that program. We need to expand our monetary assistance program. That's the kind of education that the Deltas have always stood for, making sure that everyone is included, no one is left out. If you have the ability to do college work, we want you to go to college, get that scholarship, and make sure we have smart people who stay right here in Illinois to start new businesses and invent new products and do hard jobs and make our state a better place. I guess that's the 1 minute there, Charles, and we'll start answering questions. I do want to thank everyone for coming and for hosting this event tonight.
That sounds like the 1 minute opening statement. Here's the first question provided by the forum. With a $13 billion budget deficit, the state of Illinois ended fiscal year 2010 in worse shape than any other state, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. The current budget cuts included $576 million from the Department of Human Services, whose program services many in the African American community. The cuts also included $300 million from pre-K through 12 schools, which also primarily affects black and brown children in the Chicago area. As governor, how will you substantively reverse this trend and restore services to the underserved communities most affected by DHS and education cuts?
Right. Number one, there were not cuts in education thanks to President Obama and my work. Supported by President Obama, this summer we were able to get $415 million new dollars for education in Illinois. Thanks to the President. Illinois got that. I went to Washington at his behest and worked with the Congress to make sure they passed it. It's called Keep Teachers Working. Chicago alone will get over $100 million of that money. As a matter of fact, our state is funding education slightly higher this year than we did when I became governor. We have actually invested more in education. Now, we have talked to our friends at the Chicago Public Schools, and including Ron Huberman, that the money is not to be admired in the bank vault. It's used to be hiring teachers back and other teachers' assistants. We're going to put a lot of pressure on them to follow the law. But education investment has been maintained. Now, on the other issue of human services, when I became governor, members of the General Assembly, both houses, passed a budget that cut human services by 50% in Illinois. That's how they wanted to balance the budget. It would have been severe cuts, draconian cuts, and important things that we need for families across Illinois, especially families in a recession. I vetoed that budget. And for 45 days, we had a standoff, a siege, I guess you would say. Ultimately, there were cuts in the human service budget of 15%, far less worse than it would have been if it was 50%. Now, I'm not happy with this. We want to get more investment in human services, as well as health care and education. The best way to do that is to have a more growing economy. And we have had. Since the beginning of this year, our state has had 8 straight months of declining unemployment. We've created more jobs than any other Midwestern state since January 1. And we've created more manufacturing jobs. Ford, for example, is expanding 1,200 new manufacturing jobs right here in the city of Chicago. Navistar, expanding, other companies as well. We still have a long, long way to go. And I was on the south side of Chicago today at Kennedy King, talking about a job initiative called the Neighborhood Recovery Initiative to help put people back to work. That is the very best way to get our budget back in order, and I work on that issue all the time.
Governor, you want to raise the income tax by 1%, a surcharge for public education, and you'd like to get this done soon after the election.
Right.
Can you explain to folks who right now are wondering, basically everybody thinks their check isn't big enough, you want to take another point away. Can you justify that to people sitting here?
Okay. It's never easy talking about raising revenue for anything in government, but I think there's one tax that's based on ability to pay. It's the income tax. It's a principle as old as the Bible that taxes should be based on ability to pay. Right now we fund education, and this institution here, Chicago Urban League, knows better than anybody. We fund the bulk of our education in Illinois with the property tax, a tax that is not based on ability to pay. A 19th century tax, a very complicated, confusing, and unfair tax. I used to be the Commissioner of Property Tax Appeals in this county, and I saw firsthand men and women coming before me, losing their homes, their businesses because of an unfair property tax. I want to reduce the property tax. There's only one way to do it, to fulfill what the Constitution of Illinois says right there in plain language. It was approved by the voters 40 years ago, that the state of Illinois has the primary responsibility for funding schools. Now, this is the most important way we can help equal opportunity in our whole state of Illinois. A boy or girl's education should not depend on how much property wealth exists in the neighborhood where they go to school. This is not fair, and the Urban League has filed lawsuits about this, and they're, well, thank you very much over there. You know, we should not have a system where your school finances are based on property wealth. We have to get away from that. And so I have proposed a surcharge for education that will put more state money into our schools. And that's every level of schools: early childhood, grammar school, high school, community college, four-year university, and expanding our program of scholarships, where we have 400,000 students getting scholarships to go to college. Investing in education is the best way to create jobs and keep jobs in our state. Now, there are those who say, well, if you raise taxes in a tough time, that's not a good thing. Well, I don't think it's easy, but I think it's important that we tell people the truth. We've had a lot of governors in Illinois who, before the election, run around the state. I can think of some Republican governors by the name of Thompson, Edgar, Ryan, and a guy named Brady right now. They run around the state and say, no new taxes. As soon as the election is over, they raise taxes. And they raise property taxes. They let property taxes go higher. As a matter of fact, this fellow Brady I'm running against, who isn't here tonight, he's down in Bloomington or somewhere else, he even said under his plan he would cut education funding by $1.2 billion, fire 20,000 teachers, cram kids into overcrowded classrooms, and he said there will be a natural rise in property taxes. Who needs that? That is not fair, and I think we need a governor who tells people the truth.
Governor, let's talk about unemployment. Unemployment in the state was recently reported at 9.9%. That's a 1/10% less than it has been since 2008. However, the African American community's unemployment rate is twice that, conservatively. I think it's reported at around 17%. What do you do as governor in your term, should you win this election, to address specifically the problem of African American unemployment? What are you going to do to address that part of the unemployment picture? And we don't want to hear about a rising tide lifts all boats. We want to hear about this problem, which has been specific to the African American community, and what you will do to address it.
Now, some people may want to hear my little anecdote, and I will give it. President Kennedy, when I was growing up, said a rising tide lifts all boats. He did not say a rising tide lifts all yachts. He said all boats, and I believe in everybody, and that means rowboats. And I think it's important that everybody get a fair shake at a good job. The best way to fight poverty, the best way to fight crime, the best way to keep families together is a job. And so I understand. I live in the west side of Chicago. I've lived there for 27 years in Austin, and I understand what it is when people don't have a job, how despairing it can be for a family. I met a veteran just back from Iraq, Tremel Overstreet. He did not have a job. He served our country, he wore the uniform of our country, he's from the west side, didn't have a job. And so what do? Well, the President of the United States knows what to do, and I am a good friend of President Barack Obama, and he got $200 million for our state this summer, beginning in May, and we have a program called Put Illinois to Work that I think is a model. We want to keep it going. Put Illinois to Work is a model for the whole country. It says we get emergency money to put people to work on mostly private jobs. We have literally, so it was 26,000 people got jobs under this program. $10 an hour, 5,000 different private employers. The Urban League believes in working with our private sector, getting jobs. I think Herman told me the Urban League has placed over 400 people in the program of Put Illinois to Work on private jobs. I want to tell you about some